In the 376th year, the tribes of Visigoths, Scythians, and Sarmatians began to migrate to Thrace. The nomadic tribes of the Huns, who had invaded Eastern Europe from behind the Ural Mountains, drove them from their habitual habitats. Atanarich, the supreme leader of the Visigoths, asked the Roman Emperor Flavius Julius Valentus II, who ruled the eastern part of the Roman Empire, for permission to settle on the southern banks of the Danube. In exchange, the Visigoths pledged to perform border garrison service in favor of the empire. A part of Visigoths really has passed a sedentary way of life, has accepted Christianity, having entered the constant military service to emperor. However, most of the nomads settled in Thrace, in every possible way evaded service, engaged in robbery and plunder, did not pay taxes, oppressed the local population. Roman authorities in turn sold bread to the Visigoths at prohibitively high prices, ruining them. The viceroys behaved just as despotically and unceremoniously in the forced recruitment for military service. No wonder the nomads soon revolted. To bring the Visigoths to obedience, Valentus had to use force. In the fall of 377th year, the Romans defeated the Visigoths at Marcianopolis. The new governor of the Visigoths, Fritigern, called for help tribes of Osgoths and Alans. Thus, the united army of Goths, to which joined enslaves, threw an open challenge to the Roman Empire. At this time, Emperor Valentus was at war with the Persians in the east. He had to urgently conclude peace and hurriedly march through Asia Minor to move to his possessions. The decisive battle of Romans and nomads took place on August 9th of the next year near the city of Adrianople. In the morning, the Roman army left the transport at the walls of Adrianople and went in the direction of the enemy. It had to make a tedious march to the northeast on a stony plain under the mercilessly scorching sun. In addition, the Goths had set fire to the surrounding fields to make the march more difficult and to conceal their movements. Valentus led his army for almost 7 hours in the increasing heat. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a scout reported that an enemy camp had been discovered ahead. The Goths positioned their wagons in a circle shape, taking cover behind them. Valentus ordered his soldiers to reorganize into battle order for the attack. At this time, Fritigern's ambassadors arrived. They offered the emperor knowingly impossible conditions to give the Goths almost half of the Balkan territories in exchange for peace. The leader of the Goths deliberately put forward such demands in order to delay the negotiations. He was waiting for the approach of 2 mounted detachments, Gothic under the command of Flavius and Alanian under the command of Safric. Valentus interrupted the negotiations. He demanded that the Goths send to him the most noble leaders, not representatives of the nobility. The nomads promised to fulfill this request, but deliberately delayed, which caused the anger of the emperor. Then Valentus decided to forcefully resolve the conflict. His army lined up in 2 lines in the 1st Cavalry in the 2nd Infantry. The right flank of the cavalry was somewhat advanced forward, the left, and did not have time to fully occupy the original boundary. In the reserve of the emperor remained a detachment of Batavian infantry. Iberian archers led by Bacurius and Cassian's light infantry began the battle. These Roman units broke away from the main force, chasing a bunch of Goths who quickly disappeared behind the wagons. When the Iberians and Cassian soldiers approached the Goth camp, they were pelted with stones and arrows, putting them to flight. The left wing of the Roman infantry rushed to the rescue and at one point almost broke into the enemy camp. However, without the support of its own right flank cavalry, practically inactive, this impulse was nullified by the courageous defense of the infantry and archers Fritigern. The barbarians repulsed the onslaught of the enemy and went on the attack themselves. Roman legions were squeezed from all sides. In the incredible crowding, and crushed soldiers could not use swords, spears, even to cover themselves with a shield, while the Goths skillfully wielded axes, showered the enemy with a downpour of arrows. Worn out by the multi-kilometer march, hungry and tired of heat, Romans could not withstand the battle and began to retreat in droves, forming gaps in the battle order. The Roman cavalry, consisting mainly of Gauls, Franks, and Germans, as well as the light cavalry of the Arabs, were easily overturned by the Goth horsemen and forced off the battlefield. Valentus finally lost control of his troops and was one of the first to rush with the guard to Adrianople. The reserve of the Romans fled even earlier in the same direction. Soon after, the emperor ran and all his army. At the same time on the battlefield appeared the cavalry of Flavius and Saffricus. They immediately struck, descending from the hills in a broad front, on the flanks of the fleeing army. Only the two elite legions made up of veterans continued to fight until they were completely annihilated. Very quickly and universally, a general panic and crush began among the fleeing masses of Romans. They rushed to the exit of the gorge, trying to break out of the encirclement in time. Only a few succeeded. Most of the infantrymen were killed by the Goths or trampled by horses. The barbarians took no prisoners, destroying the enemy, every last one of them. The chase continued until dark. Romans tried to hide among stones and ravines, but Goths easily found them and exterminated. The defeat of the Romans was complete. Not without reason, contemporaries compared its consequences with the defeat at Cannes. The army of Valentus lost killed and missing about 15,000 people. Among the dead were 35 tribunes, legates, and prefects, as well as almost the entire court of the emperor. Valentus himself was also killed. His body was not found among the dead Romans. On one of versions, it mortally wounded by an arrow. On other, wounded emperor with bodyguards has locked in a wooden building. Goths, not knowing that inside is the Roman governor, set fire to the building. Valentus and his soldiers were burned in the flames. Losses of the Goths and their allies did not exceed 3,000 people. After the victory over the Romans at Adrianople, Gothic tribes became almost complete masters of the Balkan Peninsula. The Western Roman Empire was no longer able to expel the nomads from the eastern outskirts of the once united state. The new emperor of the eastern part of Empire, Theodosius, tried to conduct wars with Goths and was forced to go to the unprofitable for itself peace in the end. On its conditions, Goths began to carry service in East Roman Empire and to receive for it the treasury maintenance. At the same time, the nomads were subordinate not to Roman governors, but to their leaders. The Visigoths were given the right to settle permanently in Thrace and Macedonia, and the Ostgoths in Pannonia.